Ladies and gentlemen, when we speak of cheating in a relationship, most people see it only as an act of betrayal, a moral failure, a wound inflicted upon the heart of another. Yet psychology, especially from a Jungian perspective, teaches us to look deeper. Infidelity is not merely a social or moral violation, it is a manifestation of the psyche itself, crying out for recognition. Cheating is the voice of the shadow, those unacknowledged desires, impulses, and unmet needs that we push away from consciousness. We pretend they do not exist, but the shadow does not vanish. It waits. And when left unexamined, it breaks into our lives through destructive choices, such as betrayal. In this sense, the unfaithful person is not simply betraying their partner, they are betraying their own potential for wholeness. At the same time, infidelity exposes a split within the human soul. On one side, there is duty, loyalty, and the conscious identity we show the world. On the other, there is desire, freedom, and the hunger for novelty. When these forces are not reconciled within, they emerge in conflict, tearing relationships apart. What we call cheating is often the symptom of a psyche that has not achieved balance between responsibility and instinct. But let us not mistake this analysis as justification. To understand is not to excuse. Rather, it is to illuminate the deeper truth, that betrayal in love often masks an unconscious search for lost parts of the self. The unfaithful individual is, in a distorted way, attempting to feel alive, to rediscover passion, to grasp at something missing in their inner world. The task for all of us, therefore, is integration. To face our shadow honestly, to recognize our desires before they destroy trust, and to learn that true intimacy is not built on suppression, but on awareness. Only when we bring the hidden self into the light can love be sustained with authenticity. So, cheating in a relationship is not only a social crime, but a psychological lesson. It reminds us of the cost of unconscious living. If we wish to protect our relationships, we must first reconcile with ourselves. For only a whole individual can create a whole union. When we speak of cheating in a relationship, most people interpret it simply as the act of one person breaking faith with another. But from a Jungian perspective, such an event cannot be reduced to surface morality alone. It is not only about lies, secrecy, or the violation of trust, but about the eruption of something far more ancient, far more powerful, that exists within the human psyche itself. In Jung's language, cheating is one of the many masks of the shadow. The shadow is that hidden counterpart of the conscious self, containing the drives, impulses, and images that the individual refuses to acknowledge. It is everything that one does not wish to be, yet is. We imagine ourselves faithful, loyal, controlled, and moral, but within us there remains another figure, raw, instinctual, desiring, unbound by duty or conscience. When that figure is ignored, when it is denied a voice in consciousness, it emerges in life through compulsive acts. Cheating, then, is not only a betrayal of one's partner, but also the betrayal of the self's potential for integration, because it shows us that we are being ruled not by choice, but by what has been exiled to the shadows. Consider that most individuals do not set out to betray. They often describe their infidelity as something that just happened, as if they were overtaken by a force outside of themselves. This is the language of the unconscious. The ego, our conscious identity, prides itself on control and rationality. But the shadow operates on a deeper level. It does not ask for permission, it erupts when neglected. Cheating becomes the stage upon which the shadow reveals its presence. The hidden desires for novelty, attention, or freedom that were suppressed in daily life suddenly step into the spotlight, often at the cost of destroying what the ego had carefully constructed. What seems, on the surface, to be a moral lapse, is in truth a psychic drama, the unacknowledged parts of the self staging a revolt. This raises an uncomfortable question: is the act of cheating an act against another person, or is it primarily an act against oneself? Of course, it injures the one who is deceived. Yet in the deeper sense, it is the cheater who has been deceived all along, living under the illusion that their shadow can be silenced by repression. When that illusion collapses, the person finds themselves not only betraying a loved one, but also realizing that they have been betrayed by their own unconscious. They are not the master of their desires are the master of them. This is the paradox of the shadow. It appears as an enemy, but it is in fact a messenger. The betrayal of the shadow is not accidental. It arises precisely because the individual has failed to integrate those hidden desires into their conscious life. If one has unacknowledged needs for intimacy, playfulness, or freedom, and these are not spoken about or worked through honestly, the psyche does not simply erase them. They remain, alive and waiting, in the shadows. The act of cheating may thus be understood as a symbolic attempt to reclaim vitality, to reconnect with what feels lost or deadened. In this sense, it is a tragic attempt at healing, carried out destructively. What might have been achieved through honest communication, self-reflection, and growth is instead achieved through secrecy, deception, and the shattering of trust. The shadow, left unexamined, heals by wounding. It is important here to remember that the shadow is not inherently evil. Jung warned against such simplistic moral judgments. The shadow contains much that is valuable: passion, creativity, vitality, and raw authenticity. When someone cheats, it is not only lust or deceit that drives them, often it is the repressed longing to feel alive, to experience once again the intensity of desire, to escape the weight of a life that has become too narrow, too predictable. These desires, if brought into the light of consciousness, could become sources of renewal within a relationship. But when denied, they twist into destructive expressions. The betrayal is therefore double. The partner is betrayed, and the shadow itself is betrayed, because its gifts were not integrated but distorted. One may ask, why does the shadow choose such destructive paths? The answer is that the unconscious speaks in symbols, not in rational strategies. To the unconscious, cheating is not only about seeking another body, but about breaking out of confinement. It is an image of freedom, of risk, of returning to the primal energies of life. Unfortunately, when enacted in reality, it causes chaos rather than healing. This is why Jung emphasized the necessity of dialogue with the shadow in advance, before it bursts forth in life. By reflecting honestly on one's impulses, by admitting the darker desires, by integrating them consciously, the individual gains freedom from their compulsive power. Without this integration, the shadow controls us from the dark, and cheating is one of its weapons. The betrayal of the shadow also teaches us about projection. Often, the unfaithful individual projects their disowned qualities onto the new partner. They see in the lover freedom, beauty, vitality, or power, qualities that they have denied in themselves. The affair becomes a mirror, reflecting back what is missing in their conscious identity. In reality, they are not pursuing another person as much as they are pursuing their own lost parts. They are trying to touch again what they have repressed. Yet, because this is unconscious, the pursuit is doomed to remain unsatisfying. No affair can truly heal the split within the self, because the real task is not external conquest, but inner integration. This is why cheating often leads to cycles of guilt and repetition. The person feels torn, ashamed, confused. They recognize the moral weight of their betrayal, yet feel equally compelled by the forbidden desire. They are caught in the tension of opposites, unable to reconcile loyalty with freedom, duty with passion. Until the shadow is consciously addressed, they remain trapped, repeating the same patterns, sabotaging their own search for wholeness. The betrayal of the shadow will not cease until it is finally listened to. What, then, is the lesson? The act of cheating, painful as it is, may be understood as a call to individuation, the process Jung described as becoming whole. Infidelity shatters illusions, exposes fractures, and forces individuals to confront the split between their conscious values and unconscious desires. It reveals where integration has failed. If approached with honesty, this crisis can become an opportunity for growth. If ignored, it becomes the start of endless repetition and suffering. Ultimately, the betrayal of the shadow reminds us that no relationship can be healthy if it is built upon repression. To deny one's shadow is to deny one's humanity. The only way forward is to face those desires openly, to name them, to find constructive forms of expression. Fidelity, in the deepest sense, is not simply refraining from betrayal. It is fidelity to the wholeness of one's being, which means honoring both light and shadow within. Only then can one offer true fidelity to another. Thus, when we see cheating, we should not reduce it to the surface level of scandal or moral outrage. We should ask, what shadow was ignored? What hidden truth was betrayed? What unlived life demanded expression, and why was it forced to appear in such a destructive way? By asking these questions, we do not excuse betrayal, we illuminate it. And in that illumination lies the chance for healing, for integration, and for love that is not blind, but whole. When we observe cheating in a relationship, we are often tempted to see it simply as a lack of discipline, a choice to disregard values, or a selfish indulgence. But beneath this outer act lies a deeper psychological reality, the human being divided against itself. Cheating is not only an outward betrayal of another, but an inner revelation of fragmentation within the psyche. In Jungian thought, the human soul is not a single unified entity, but a constellation of parts, each with its own voice, its own demands, and its own rhythm. The conscious self, what we call the ego, believes it is in charge, but in truth it is only one small island floating in the vast sea of the unconscious. Infidelity shows us what happens when the different forces within this psychic system are not reconciled. At the surface, one part of the self wants loyalty, order, stability, and moral integrity. This is the side that makes promises, builds homes, and commits to another person. It is the side aligned with society's expectations, family duty, and one's own image of who they are. But another part of the self exists in secret. It does not care for vows or appearances. It lives in instinct, passion, novelty, and risk. It is not concerned with the collective, but with the individual's hunger for experience. When these two sides of the psyche cannot find harmony, they split apart. Cheating then becomes the battlefield where this split plays out, a person bound by loyalty in one realm, yet driven by desire in another. Jung described this state as psychic disunity. The individual is torn between opposites, unable to reconcile them. In myth, this condition often appears as a figure divided in two, one half light and one half dark, or as a wanderer standing at a crossroads unable to choose a path. In life, it appears as a man or woman who cannot integrate devotion and freedom, love and desire, stability and passion. They live one truth in daylight and another in the night, unable to bring these opposing parts into dialogue. The result is inner chaos, which inevitably spills into outer life. Infidelity is the symptom of this inner civil war. What makes this fragmentation so destructive is that each part of the psyche speaks with authority. The loyal self believes with full conviction that it is living truthfully. It looks at the partner and says, "I love you, I am committed to you, I will stand by you." And in that moment, it is sincere. But the desiring self, emerging later, speaks with equal intensity. It looks at another person and says, "You make me feel alive, you awaken what is missing, I cannot resist you." And in that moment, it too is sincere. Both voices are authentic, yet they contradict each other. This is why cheating is not always born of cold calculation, but often from genuine fragmentation. The person is not lying in the simplest sense, rather, they are torn between different truths, unable to unify them. From a Jungian perspective, this disunity reflects a failure of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating all aspects of the self. The ego prefers simplicity, the illusion that one can be entirely consistent, pure, and singular. But the unconscious holds opposites within it. A person can be faithful and unfaithful, devoted and desiring, stable and restless, all at once. To live healthily is not to erase one side, but to bring them into balance, to recognize their presence and find constructive ways of honoring both. When this is not done, the psyche splits. The loyal self and the desiring self wage war, and the battlefield is the relationship. This psychic fragmentation is often misunderstood as weakness or hypocrisy. But in truth, it reveals the complexity of the human soul. Few people wish to betray, but many people long for what seems forbidden. The tragedy is not that these longings exist, but that they are repressed instead of integrated. A man who ignores his desire for adventure may suddenly be overcome by it, leading him to betray his partner in secret. A woman who denies her need for passion may find herself irresistibly drawn to someone outside her marriage. These actions are not deliberate betrayals of love, but eruptions of an unintegrated side of the self. What is denied in consciousness forces itself into life in unconscious form. The suffering caused by this disunity is profound. The partner who is betrayed feels deceived and broken, but the unfaithful one often suffers as well. They feel torn in two, ashamed and exhilarated, guilty yet unable to stop. They may say, "I love my partner, yet I love this other person too," or "I don't want to hurt anyone, yet I cannot resist myself." These contradictions are not mere excuses, they are the lived reality of a fragmented psyche. To the outside world, such a person seems untrustworthy. But to themselves, they feel like a prisoner caught between warring forces. Mythology often illustrates this condition through images of splitting. The Greek god Dionysus, god of ecstasy and madness, was said to be torn apart by titans and later reborn. This tearing apart symbolizes the fragmentation of instinct and consciousness. Similarly, the medieval idea of the soul torn between heaven and hell represents the same psychic division. Cheating in relationships is a modern manifestation of these timeless patterns, the human being ripped between higher duty and primal instinct. Yet there is also an opportunity hidden in this fragmentation. Jung believed that opposites exist to be reconciled, and that their tension can give birth to a new level of consciousness. The individual who cheats has not yet reconciled loyalty with freedom, but the crisis of betrayal may force them to confront this disunity. It may compel them to ask, "What am I really seeking? What does my loyalty mean if I feel alive only in secrecy? What does my desire mean if it destroys trust?" These questions, painful as they are, can become the doorway to individuation. The challenge is not to suppress one side of the psyche but to bring them into dialogue. Fidelity must not be equated with lifelessness, nor passion with betrayal. A relationship that denies freedom eventually suffocates, while a freedom that denies loyalty eventually destroys. To become whole is to hold both truths, to learn how to live responsibly without killing desire, and to honor desire without violating love. This is the work of integration, the healing of fragmentation. Cheating, then, is not simply an act of selfishness, though it may appear that way on the surface. It is a signpost pointing to a deeper psychological fracture. It tells us that the person is divided, unable to reconcile inner forces. The lesson is that unless this fragmentation is addressed, no amount of promises or discipline will prevent repetition. One cannot will away the unconscious. One must meet it, learn from it, and integrate it. Only then can the psyche become whole, and only then can love be lived with authenticity. Thus, cheating shows us the cost of inner disunity. It is the outward consequence of an inward fracture. It reveals to us, often painfully, that the soul cannot be split without consequences. To betray another is to live the drama of a divided self. To heal from it is to embark on the path toward wholeness, where love and desire, duty and freedom, stability and vitality are no longer enemies but partners in the fullness of human life. When we look at the phenomenon of cheating in relationships, it is tempting to see only the act of betrayal, the lies, and the rupture of trust. Yet if we follow Jung's insight, we begin to see that beneath such destructive behavior lies something more fundamental, a misguided attempt at healing, a distorted effort to restore wholeness to the self. Human beings are not simply creatures of morality and social rules, they are driven by archetypal patterns, deep unconscious longings, and the timeless search to unite the divided parts of their inner world. Infidelity, tragic as it is, can be understood as an unconscious attempt to reclaim what has been lost, to recover parts of the psyche that were exiled or neglected. Every person carries within them unfulfilled desires, unlived potentials, and forgotten dreams. These do not vanish with age or with commitment. They remain, often buried beneath responsibility and routine. The psyche longs for completeness, for the union of opposites, masculine and feminine, loyalty and freedom, instinct and morality. When this longing is not consciously honored, it appears in disguised and destructive ways. Cheating often emerges as one such disguise. It is not merely about lust or novelty, it is about reaching for a lost part of the self that one feels unable to access within the confines of ordinary life. The lover outside the relationship often becomes a symbol, a mirror in which the individual glimpses the vitality, youth, freedom, or creativity that they feel has been repressed. The search for wholeness is ancient. In myth and religion, it is represented as the quest for the missing half, the Holy Grail, the reunion of Adam and Eve, the merging of sun and moon. Jung called this the archetype of the self, the totality of the psyche, where all opposites are reconciled. But in daily life, individuals rarely live from this level of consciousness. Instead, they live from the ego, a narrow identity that denies large portions of the self. A man may identify only as a provider, suppressing his need for playfulness and emotional expression. A woman may identify only as a caretaker, repressing her longing for independence and passion. Over time, these denied aspects do not die, they haunt the individual from within. Infidelity becomes a misguided attempt to reunite with these missing parts. The affair offers, for a brief moment, the illusion of wholeness. Yet it is an illusion, because wholeness cannot be found in another person. The missing parts of the psyche cannot be permanently recovered through secret liaisons. They must be integrated consciously. The other person may awaken what has been forgotten, but the true task is to claim it within oneself. If a man feels alive only with his lover, he has not yet integrated his own vitality. If a woman feels free only in secrecy, she has not yet embraced her own inner independence. The search for wholeness projected onto another will always lead to disappointment, because it seeks outside what must be discovered within. This is why cheating so often brings confusion and emptiness. What begins as exhilarating soon turns into conflict, guilt, and disillusionment. The new relationship cannot carry the weight of the archetype. It cannot fulfill the impossible expectation of restoring the lost self. The affair collapses under the burden of projection. Yet even in its collapse, it reveals something essential, the deep hunger for wholeness that drove it. The task is to recognize that hunger and redirect it inward, toward self-reflection and integration. Jung taught that every act of betrayal, every fall into shadow, contains within it the possibility of growth. Cheating, as destructive as it is, can force the individual to confront what has been missing in their life. It raises painful but necessary questions. What part of myself have I denied? What needs have I silenced? Why did I seek outside what I could not face within? These questions open the door to individuation, the process of becoming whole. If answered honestly, they can transform betrayal into a turning point. If ignored, the cycle repeats endlessly, with new partners, new secrets, and the same inner void. The search for wholeness also sheds light on the partner who is betrayed. For they, too, are invited into reflection. They may ask, what role did unconscious patterns play in the relationship? What parts of the self did both partners neglect, leading to stagnation or distance? The wound of betrayal can awaken not only the betrayer, but also the betrayed, to the unfinished work of wholeness in their own lives. This does not excuse the act, but it deepens our understanding of its meaning. Cheating, painful as it is, can be a mirror in which both partners are confronted with the unacknowledged truths of their psyches. The human longing for wholeness cannot be eliminated, nor should it be. It is the force that drives art, love, spirituality, and creativity. The problem arises when we seek to fulfill it unconsciously, through destructive or deceptive means. To live consciously is to recognize the reality of one's desires, to admit them openly, and to integrate them into life without hiding. A relationship rooted in honesty allows space for growth, for dialogue about needs and desires, for the exploration of passion within the bond of loyalty. Such a relationship does not demand perfection, but it does demand awareness. When partners face their shadows together, when they honor both stability and vitality, they build a love that is not threatened by the search for wholeness, but enriched by it. The search for wholeness is ultimately spiritual. It points beyond relationships, beyond social roles, to the mystery of being human. Every betrayal, every longing, every mistake is part of the larger journey toward the self. Infidelity is one of the darker manifestations of this journey, a detour into shadow. But even the detour reveals the path. It shows us that we cannot live half a life, denying what we are. We must face our divided selves, integrate what is missing, and grow into the fullness of our humanity. Only then can we love another person without using them as a mirror for our own incompleteness. To cheat is to search blindly for wholeness in another's arms. To heal is to recognize that the lost half is within. The partner may awaken it, but only the individual can claim it. The work is inner work, demanding courage, honesty, and self-awareness. If undertaken, the search for wholeness becomes not a path of betrayal, but a path of transformation. Through it, relationships can be rebuilt on truth, and the individual can discover what Jung saw as the deepest goal of life, not perfection, but completeness. So when we see cheating, we must look deeper than judgment alone. We must ask, what longing for wholeness lay beneath the betrayal? What parts of the self demanded recognition? What illusions collapsed, and what truths now stand revealed? In asking these questions, we begin to understand infidelity not only as a wound, but also as a signpost on the soul's journey. It is a painful reminder that wholeness cannot be found in secrecy, but only in the light of consciousness. Cheating in a relationship is never just about a single act of betrayal. It is a mirror reflecting the hidden forces of the psyche, the shadow that we refuse to face, the fragmentation that tears us apart within, and the deeper hunger for wholeness that drives us forward, often in destructive ways. From a Jungian perspective, infidelity is not only a moral failure but also a psychological revelation. It shows us where we are unconscious, where we have denied parts of ourselves, and where we have mistaken external substitutes for inner integration. The lesson is not to excuse betrayal, but to understand it. For when we understand, we open the possibility of transformation. Every shadow that emerges calls us to face what we have repressed. Every split in the psyche urges us to reconcile opposites within. Every misguided search for wholeness reminds us that love cannot heal what the self refuses to acknowledge. The true task, then, is not perfection, but consciousness. To live with awareness of one's desires, to speak honestly about one's needs, to recognize both the light and the shadow within, is the only path to authentic intimacy. A relationship grounded in such awareness does not fear betrayal, because it is built on truth rather than illusion. And an individual who has faced their own depths is no longer ruled by them. So let us see cheating not only as the breaking of a vow, but as a warning of the cost of unconscious living. Let us learn from its pain that wholeness cannot be stolen from another, but must be created within. For only a person who has reconciled with themselves can remain faithful, not out of suppression, but out of genuine wholeness. And only in such wholeness can love truly endure. Thank you.